Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Wednesday, August 3rd meeting of the Hamilton Zoning Board of Appeals. Our agenda is public hearing seeking a variance, an extension, or alteration of a non-conforming use, structure, or lot to construct a new attached two-car garage with storage above at the property located at 135.
Did they not know about this?
Apparently not.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, can we mute you, please?
Well, this is Town Council. This is Robin Stein from KP Live. I just wanted to raise an issue that's come up, if it's okay with you.
Okay, just let me, can I read the agenda first, or do you want to get to it?
It'd be great if you didn't read the agenda, technically.
Just remember, I've got the key, so. Okay, the floor is yours.
So it appears that there's a bit of an overlap this evening on your Zooms between your conservation meeting and your planning board meeting, which is why folks keep getting kicked off. The conservation agent has indicated that he needs a few minutes with the Zoom. And so I didn't know if perhaps the zoning board would be willing to recess its meeting until 7:30. You can announce over now to folks as well as to folks in the room and to anyone watching. I believe the zoning board meeting is being live streamed on Hamilton Wenham Cable Access Television.
Yes, but it's hybrid. You share the same Zoom link, that's the problem. Get it.
Okay, I guess, well, we want this to be everybody to have their thing, so I guess I'm inclined to postpone. I just will point out for the record that the first Wednesday of the month is always the Zoning Board of Appeals, so don't want to get into a turf war with my Concom friends, but, we had it first. But that seems like it probably will make sense, but we won't go past 7:30 because a lot of people are here to hear us approve the minutes.
I appreciate it very much. It's an emergency. It has not, this is a one-off. We should be done before then.
Okay, then we'll just, everybody enjoy yourself. Okay. Oh, hello again. This is the August 3rd, Wednesday, meeting of the Hamilton Zoning Board of Appeals. Our agenda is as follows. Public hearing for a variance, an extension or alteration of non-conforming use, structure, or lot to construct a new attached two-car garage with storage above at the property located at 135 Lakeshore Avenue, owner Travis James. Continuation of a public hearing for a comprehensive permit submitted by Harbor Light Community Partners under MGL Chapter 40B for construction of a 45-unit multifamily housing. Property is at 466 Highland Street and is owned by the Britton Family Trust, LLC. Continuation of a public hearing for property owned by Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary located at 130 Essex Street. Applicant is Harbor Light Community Partners, Inc., seeking a variance from the lot area requirements in zoning bylaw section 4.1 in order to create 3 lots pursuant to ZBL section 5.3.2.1 and findings of fact under ZB section 5.2 for a change of use from student housing to multifamily dwelling under section 5.3.1.2 to construct 3 additions to the existing multifamily dwellings which have historically been used for student housing. And we will consider and possibly approve meeting minutes from our June and July meetings. Just before we get going, we are, of course, live. We are also on Zoom. If you are speaking, please go to the, in person, please go to the podium so that you can be heard and recorded. And there'll be plenty of time for questions and comments and input. I think the only matter that we are likely to take a vote on tonight is the first one, 135 Lake Shore Avenue. So I guess we can get going. Is there someone here to present?
Excuse me, one moment, Bill. Sorry to interrupt. It's Robin Stein from KP Law again. Just for the sake of folks watching on Zoom and at home, would you mind introducing the board members? And then I also just wanted to recommend that you confirm with each applicant that they don't have any issues going forward given the delay tonight. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Bill Bowler, Chairman.
Bruce Gingrich, board member.
Andy Phillip, associate.
Stephen DeRocher, associate member.
Okay, and all right, do any of the applicants for any of the matters before the board have any problem with the late start at 7:30? Okay.
Excuse me, may I just interject before you start? I just want to thank everybody for.
Would you identify yourself, please?
Sorry, I'm Brian Collar, and I'm the conservation agent for the Conservation Commission in Hamilton, who is holding the meeting at the same time on the other part of this account. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for rolling that situation. For the sake of, anybody's curiosity, there was a property transaction that a permit of ours was in the way of. And if we had waited until our next regular meeting, the transaction may have fallen through. And so for the homeowner, it really was an emergency situation. So thank you, everybody, for your patience and forbearance, and we'll figure out how not to do this anymore.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're ready now. Is there someone here to present on 135 Lakeshore Avenue? Okay.
Seconds to set up, please.
Sure.
I think this is the best spot for it, or?
Sure. Yeah, I think we can see from there.
Co-host. Did you want me to be a co-host? Okay. For the record, my name is Bill Nolan from Savoy Nolan Architects. I'm here representing the James family, the owners of 135 Lakeshore Ave. We're looking, as the applicant said, to construct a two-car garage with the storage space above. I'll walk you through the project.
There's a little bit, yeah, you can see that there. I don't see-
So I'll start with the Locust Map first. This is the property, Chabaco Lakes here. This is the property right there. I just wanted to point out that there's the two properties to the other side of the house. This is an unbuildable lot here, labeled 88. And this is several smaller lots, I believe is owned by the town, with no structures on them too. So there's no structures on either side of the proposed building. But this is the property here. Moving on to the site plan, the existing house here is hatched with that crosshatch. Existing deck. We're proposing to put a two-car garage to the, I believe that's the north side of the property, or is that the west? I lost my
Come on, northwest.
yeah, northwest. Okay, we'll call it that. Here, two-car garage with a storage unit above. This just some pictures I believe you have in your packet of the existing house here. proposed, so this is the proposed basement of the house right there. There's an existing basement that has a bathroom in there. I wanted to also point out that currently the existing house has one means of egress out of the basement right now that meets code. There is a secondary emergency, I guess. In an emergency they could get out through this crawl space, but it doesn't meet definition of an egress through the code. So our garage also wants to add an interior bulkhead, if you will, to provide a second means of egress from the basement. This would be the grade level floor plan. And one of the reasons why we're here is asking for an extension of an existing non-conforming side setback. And the reason that we're asking for that is that this makes the most sense on connection back from the proposed garage into the existing house. So this is their main living space, kitchen, dining room. There's an existing hallway back here that we would come up a set of small stairs and then enter into the kitchen there. So it really does make sense for us to carry that back at that line of the house. And then there would also be a staircase going up to the storage unit above. This is the second level, and it's just an open storage area. Here are the the proposed elevations. So we're proposing to put the structure here. It matches the style of the house carried over. I worked with Travis to design a renovation of the existing structure that was really dilapidated. So this is just carrying over the same architecture into the proposed garage here, matching the roof styles, the same materials. Okay, so I think that's in short what we're proposing. The reason why we're here is for two reasons. The first is, as I mentioned, the existing setback, which is on this side of the house right here, currently is 10.5, which is required 15. So this is an extension of that nonconformity. I do want to point out that the site versus the property line versus the building is slightly angled. So as you go back, it does decrease a little bit. So what we're proposing is carrying that line back there will result in 9 foot 1.5 inch setback at the furthest most corner. We meet the setbacks on all other fronts with the exception of that. So that's reason one. The second reason that we're here is for the non-conforming building coverage for the lot. We're required to have 25% of the building coverage. The existing is, in this table right here, the existing is, we're at about 1,883 footprint of the existing house, which is 21%. What we're proposing when you add the garage, it'll bring it up to 2,750 square feet, which is 30%. The hardship here is the size of the lot. The zoning is based on a 20,000 square foot lot, which would net, if this was a conforming lot, we would be able to build a footprint of 5,000 square feet. So we're significantly under that, at just under 3,000 square feet for footprint, including the garage, which is, by today's standards, a fairly modest footprint. I think that's the extent of the presentation. Try to be brief here because it looks like you have a full slate. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from members of the board? Start there.
I have one question. Were you saying that your proposed what you're explaining as the hardship is the size of the lot?
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
I noticed in the plans, one plan on this planner elevation has 2 doors going into that side, and then the plan has one into the side, the street side of the garage. See that right?
There was a little bit of a scramble to get this in and to meet the deadline. So this may be slightly more current plan. We only have one door going, I think your question is the doors here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're only proposing to have one door
Okay.
there.
Only because I could, I'd be worried about down the road. If you have two doors there, is that a stairwell up to another apartment in the future?
Yeah,
And is that,
no
is that
plans for
possible with the Board of Health and,
Yeah, so
That's a
there's
whole-
no current plans for that, but if we were to ever want to do that, we would need to come back and, that's a special permit, I believe. Yeah. But no plans to do that. Travis is a plumber, local plumber, and he wants to store here.
I think, and I think this is probably good news, under the, that case from Brookline that begins with a B, and if anybody wants to have Balata or some,
Balalta? Balata?
sounds like a plan. Under that case, you don't need a variance, you need the extension of a non-conforming use, because basically the SJC said that, whereas we always treated it this, because you are getting closer to the lot line as a variance, but this Balata case said that where there's an existing non-conformity, for a single, a single or two-family home, and you're increasing the non-conformity, it's an extension, it's permitted, special permit as an extension of a non-conforming use rather than a variance, so it's legally an easier burden to meet, because frankly, when, the variance hardship is, well, it's difficult. So anyway, so I guess, in terms, legally, I think we can permit it, so.
Would we be permitting it as a variance or just as the extension of the
Well,
non-conformity?
I mean, he filed it as a variance, but we don't have to allow it as a variance. And assuming we grant it, we wouldn't. We want to use the least restrictive. Are there any questions or comments from, start with members of the in-person public? Okay, if you have a question or comment, please come up to the podium and identify yourself. Thank you.
Evening. My name is Jim Spittle. I have no objection to what Travis is trying to do, but I'm concerned, and as I mentioned in the original meeting that was held before the Conservation Commission, I was concerned about the lake and how this affects it, if at all. It appears from the plans that the extension could very well be going either towards or over the existing septic system. Now, I tried to look into that, and there appears that there is no diagram or drawing or anything that shows where the existing septic system is. All there is a sketch that was done that shows the, I'm not even sure what you would call it, but I can certainly give you a copy of it. This is what's on file at the Board of Health.
Okay.
I think that is what we used to call the testing area, the test plots or whatever, though it doesn't seem to give anything. And by those dimensions, I mean, this is a fairly long extension that's being put on, and there doesn't appear to be an awful lot of space going in that direction before you would either incur the septic tank or some sort of leaching field.
Okay.
I don't know how you prove that one way or the other, but I would think that that would be of concern prior to granting any kind of a building permit. And the only other thing, also, excuse me for going this way, but does the Board of Appeals come before the Planning Board? Or does the planning board approve something first and then the Board of Appeals?
This
Or is it all the same?
This is not something that would be within the planning board's jurisdiction. Anyone who, and there's no legally required order of how people, how they go to different boards. They do, anything we decide, they do have to get any necessary approvals from any other board, Concom or Board of Health. So if they haven't gotten Concom or Board of Health approval, assuming we allowed this, they'd have to go there. Now, if the Board of Health, if they did something that, I guess, let's say they said, well, you gotta cut it back, they probably wouldn't have to come back here, because if they're asking for 50 feet and the Concom says, no, you can only take 40, it'd be within our decision. If because of that they had to move it, they might have to file for an amendment, but
Or how
planning
do we
board's not.
know, how does anybody know whether or not it's affecting anything unless it goes before those boards?
Well, they
Now-
can't, you're right, if we approve something and they go to the building inspector, one of his jobs is to say, hey, looking at this, you need a sign off from Board of Health or Concom.
Because according to Massachusetts law, Title V, when you alter,
You're getting way into the weeds.
well, I'm just
So
saying,
the Board of Health, I take your point. All I can say is, he can't get a building permit unless he
unless he gets that. Yeah.
unless
Okay.
he satisfies
Well,
all of the board.
You've answered the question. That's all
Okay,
my only concern, as I say, is the lake. So,
okay.
thank you.
Anyone else?
Right, my name is Jean Fusillo. My husband and I abut the property. We're the ones that will be affected by the slant of the building encroaching on our existing property. My question, I went over and talked to Travis when I got this notice, and I was concerned of the size. It's enormous. The house already is enormous, but I don't begrudge him for wanting a garage. I have a garage, I love my garage. The thing is, the lot is a small lot. When he purchased the lot, the house that was existing, he was granted that existing footprint. He now wants to go beyond that, and there's a septic system that's well over 35 years old, and we don't know where it is. And they're, on this Title V, it says that there's a septic design attached. There is no septic design attached. We don't know where the leaching field is, and we don't know where the water line that goes across our property to his property is. And if he covers it, how are we ever gonna know?
Oh, I guess, okay, I heard there's two things. First of all, I guess I'll put the second first, just what I told this gentleman. If he has to go to the, if it needs approval by the Board of Health, he has to get that. He can't, we can approve what's within our purview, but then he has to go to whatever other boards apply, which would include the Board of Health. So.
But I don't know how it passed, the Title V
it's-
form.
I guess-
It said it passed, but they have no diagram.
Trying not to
Yeah.
say this, but basically, this is not our department.
I know, but you said you couldn't grant it. You can arbitrarily
I said,
grant?
we can grant what he's, the building. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have to meet everybody else. Anything we grant is contingent on him satisfying whatever he needs to satisfy with any other boards.
We can put that in our
I mean,
Polling
that's,
too, right? Just to have him make sure he checks with Board of Health and does some
If I may,
inspection.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
this is our first stop, so this is what we decided to go on first. We do recognize that there's likely need, it's going to need some septic work, but we don't want to go through all that process of designing a septic system and not get approved by this board. So this is kind of our first stop, and I think the chair said it well, that we have to meet all the criteria. So we're gonna have to go through Conservation Commission and the Board of Health, and we're going to have to, ultimately, if we get that far, submit a set of permit to the building inspector. So there's a lot of checkpoints along the way. This is just the first stop.
It just sounds like you're putting the cart before the horse, you know?
that's his right.
Okay.
To the first question, oh, you can sit.
All right, the water, we have to address the water line too.
It's all not my department. You said you're in a butter. Are you a direct abutter or, well, okay, so let's clear that up, because your presentation, you indicated that,
There's no house on the lot, currently.
okay,
And-
so you own the lot, but it's not a buildable lot. Is that the,
Same size as Travis. It's next to it.
Do you mind flipping to the,
Oh, sorry. So,
There's a wrong name on it. It's,
is it this property right here?
it'll say Angelo and Emanuela. This, on your, over here, we're right here.
Yeah, so it's this property, it's 88.
Yes.
So it's as long, it's not as wide, but there currently is no house on it. And if I could, there was just point of clarification. She said that we were encroaching on the property. We're not going on to her property.
no,
We're
you're
just
encroaching on the setback.
setback, yeah.
Further encroaching on the setback. So, is this a separate, okay, so you own the lot. Is it directly abutting other property you own?
Yeah, no.
No.
There's a road,
Okay,
and then we own the other,
okay.
he's on the other side of the road.
I think
So-
that
so-
might be on here too.
So
there's
it's
the-
not, okay, you are in a butter, but there's no dwelling or building that it,
Well, there's a boathouse, shed. Where he's gonna come
Okay.
back.
okay. Any further questions or comments from members of the public? Is there anyone on Zoom that wants to weigh in on this matter? Okay, colleagues, what are we thinking? And then I think on this, it will be myself, Bruce Gingrich, and Andy Phillip deliberating and voting.
Here's a question, I'm sorry, my husband has a question.
Well, but go up to or somebody, you have to be at the podium, or,
Okay. I'm Paul Fusillo. On the other side where the garage doors are going, and I'm only pointing this out because when I did my house, I had to be 25 feet from, it's a private road, my road. I had to be 25 feet from the garage doors because I have to turn into the garage.
okay.
That's not 25 feet. How are you gonna do that? It's only, what, 9? I mean, it's a private
Going
road.
off the top of my head here, there's no requirement in the bylaw, I'd have to look at it, but I don't know that there's a requirement in the bylaw that,
It's 24 feet.
Or you're thinking
You'd have to see, I have to see, and I also wanna see, I also have to see some plot lines. There was,
They're right here. Those are the
yeah, but I
lines.
wanna see them, they're gone, they're not even there anymore, they were pulled out. There was 4 plot lines, and I know they're covered. One's covered on the roadside, one's covered on my side. I don't even know what my plot line is anymore. I wanna see it, I think the land should be surveyed for that.
well,
It was, and
then
then,
that's your prerogative, to have it
That is a
surveyed,
survey.
but that's not,
That's a survey.
okay, I
plot.
just wanna see the stakes.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's fair. I don't see any stakes anymore. There were stakes there, they're gone.
Okay.
I know that they've been covered, the two of them have been covered, and one of them was pulled, two of them were pulled on my side. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Yeah, you need,
I'm Travis James, the owner of the house that we're trying to build a garage on. Thank you for your time. I can put the rest a couple of things. Gene came over a while ago, and I know it's not your department, but when I bought the house, there was a Title V. It would have been in my best interest for it to fail because the previous owner would have had to put in escrow money and everything like that. So it does pass Title V. I've already speak to a local septic design engineer just to make sure with that garage that we were able to fit in. It would have to be a new septic system that would have to go in there because we're too close. We don't meet the setbacks on the tank. And the current one leg of the current field would be too close. You have to be 10 feet away from a slab, and we're only making it by 8 feet. So unfortunately, it would trigger a new septic system. So this is kind of moot point on this stuff because those steps do have to be taken. He came out to the property. He did look at the Title V. He looked at the previous soil test that was done, I think it was 1.5 years ago when we purchased the property. So he just said, once we know what structure is going to go there, then I can design it. But the current structure will allow me to have enough space to build a new septic system and satisfy all current codes and everything along those lines. And as to the survey, we had it surveyed. We only built this house 1.5 years ago when we did this and everything like that. And when we did get it surveyed, we were in front of the board, in front of you guys, and they didn't like the outcome of the survey. So they were trying to make us resurvey it and stuff like that. And you guys essentially told them, you know, it's Donahue. That's who everybody uses. They're a known survey company. I don't know, you know, the survey is a survey. It hasn't done anything. I'm not really in the mood to pay for them to come out again because everything's still there. It's still the same. It's not. It's only 1.5 years old now when we were building the house. But that's pretty much, I think, everything across the board that I've been hearing. But the new septic system would have to be installed with the new garage. There is enough room. Dan Johnson's a local guy who does a lot of them. He's the one who came out. He's the one who measured it, did everything. He's the one who actually did the Title V originally 1.5 years ago also with this other gentleman, Preventative. So they're local guys. They're not, I don't, everything like that. So. But it would have to have a new septic system if this does get approved and brought up. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
okay, thank you. Colleagues, we are thinking, any questions?
I don't think it meets the requirements for a hardship or variance, but if we were to do it as a extension or alteration of a non-conforming structure, the benefit of the ZBA is that we're pretty black and white and we can look in the book and it's not in our purview, as the chair has said, to look at septic and go through there are other committees for that. So I would be inclined, again, not for a variance, but for the extension or alteration, and knowing that it's not in the owner's interest to put a foundation under a septic pool, and you guys are clearly going to do your due diligence on it.
We wouldn't make it by the Board of Health anyways, so, yeah.
Oh, the,
Yeah, I don't
oh,
know. I'm not, no. I think I've heard everything.
so, okay.
See what has to happen.
Are there, assuming we were going to grant this, are there any specific conditions that the board would, understanding that it's contingent on meeting all other
Committees.
boards? I guess the only one I would want to add, since there appears to be some controversy over the lot line, that the building commissioner confirm the distances that to the lot line that you've shown and that we would be approving.
Yep.
So, okay.
will, this granting and this pushover to our.
Oh, come up, yeah.
Sorry.
Just for future, if you extend his, you're not calling it a variance, but it is, because we don't have an existing structure as, right now, as far as a house or a building. We have a boat shed, because we have a dock. The property is empty right now, but we have a dock. So in the event we do want to build, are we going to be able to build? Because now we're kind
Well,
of
if it's,
kissing cousins?
well, if it's a buildable lot, I don't know the size of it, I don't know the,
Well, it's there. It's on the,
oh, you're not the applicant. I can't tell you if you're gonna be able to get a building permit.
I know.
You may, if you meet this, if there's nothing there, you meet the setbacks, maybe you do. Maybe it's a grandfathered, what's the size of the lot?
It's a grandfathered lot, but it'll stay here. 55 long, no, 85 on one side, 55, kind of angles.
I think
It's
maybe
58.50.
what she's asking
Yeah,
is,
5850.
will this decision of her neighbors impact her ability to do whatever she wants on her lot?
That's my question.
From the and I would,
No.
it won't affect you.
Okay.
No.
But yeah,
Okay.
their lot is their lot, your lot is your lot.
Okay.
So what you could always do on your lot will always be what you can do on your lot.
Okay, but there's beautiful, big, giant trees. I just hoping they don't have to chop them down.
Concom will love that.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to grant the extension of the non-conforming use/structure with the condition that the building commissioner confirm the setback distances prior to issuing a building permit. Is there a motion?
I set the motion. I
Is
set the
there a
motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye, okay. Okay, from here, I have 14 days to write and file a decision with the town clerk. You'll get a copy. There's a 20-day statutory appeal period. After that, you can, you probably should wait then for the 20 days to go by before you go before other boards. And then you should get a certified copy of the decision and file it at the registry.
Great.
Okay?
Yep, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next. This is the continuation of a public hearing for a comprehensive permit submitted by Harbor Light Community Partners for a comprehensive permit pursuant to MGL Chapter 40B for the construction of a 45-unit multifamily housing. The property is located at 466 Highland Street, owned by the Britton Family Trust, LLC. Tonight, we are going to hear discussion of traffic issues, but before that, I will just note, okay, the applicant did file an amended list of requested waivers. Of course, I had it. Okay, I believe initially, the initial waiver requested was for multifamily use. They filed a table of requested waivers. Multifamily use, the parcel is located in zoning district R-1B, single residence district. Second, reduced lot area per dwelling unit, square feet. The bylaw requires 40,000 square feet per dwelling unit. And third, impervious surfaces covering 60,525 square feet, or 28.4% of the lot. The lot is located in the Groundwater Protection Overlay District, which under 9.1.9, paren 3, close paren, has a by right limitation of 15%, or 2,500 square feet on any lot, whichever is greater. Exceeding those amounts, however, is permitted by special permit, which our design, well, this is their language, which our design meets the terms of, and thus this waiver is appropriate for the board's consideration and the issuance of a comprehensive permit. So I just wanted to enter that in the record. Before we head to traffic, does the, anything that the applicant would like to add to that?
Chairman, Rebecca Brown is on Zoom for you for a presentation, and I think your peer reviewers are probably here as well.
So we're here to discuss, hear about potential traffic. The applicant has submitted a traffic study, and the peer reviewer hired by the town has reviewed that and submitted a response to us. Those are part of the public record, and I believe are on the website for anyone that's interested. So, let's hear from the applicant. Walk us through the traffic study, please.
Hello, Andrew Dufresne. Sorry, Andrew Dufresne from Harbor Light Community Partners, and Rebecca Brown is the traffic engineer, and will give you the presentation related to her report.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe I may need to be given permission to share my screen to go through the traffic presentation.
Permission granted.
All right. Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay now.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So we have put together a traffic impact and access study for this development, which is located along Asbury Street with access via one full access and egress driveway out onto Asbury Street. The study area included the site driveway intersection with Asbury Street, as well as the Canterbrook Village or driveway that's known as Canterbrook Lane, intersection onto Asbury Street, and the intersection of Asbury Street and Highland Street as well. That study area was reviewed by the town's peer review consultant, GM2, and they did agree that the study area was appropriate for the size and scale of the project and the volume of traffic that it could potentially generate on the surrounding area roadways. As part of our traffic study, we collected traffic volumes back in January during the weekday morning and weekday evening peak commuter time periods. We then adjusted these traffic volumes to account for seasonal variation to grow these up to an average month condition. Based on Mass DOT permanent count stations in the surrounding area, January traffic volumes are generally about 5% lower than average month conditions. So we did grow those traffic volumes up by 5% to adjust to average month conditions. We did also take a look at the closest permanent count station to the site that had data available both pre and post-COVID conditions to see how current traffic volumes or traffic volumes back in January of 2022 compared to pre-COVID traffic volumes from January 2020. In the AM, they're about 10% lower right now in 2022. compared to 2020 volumes, and in the afternoon they're about 4% lower. So we did also increase the traffic volumes to account for that variation due to COVID as well. In accordance with Mass DOT standards, we grew the traffic volumes out to a 7-year design horizon to a 2029 condition. And we did that based on a 1% per year growth rate over those 7 years. Historically, traffic volumes in this area have been growing at a rate of about 0.8% per year, so that 1% is a conservative number. And then at the time that the traffic counts were collected, not all of the development within Canterbrook Village, or not all of these units had been occupied at the time. So we did also increase the traffic volumes to account for full occupancy of all of the units within that development as well. Once we had projected out to a future year condition, we estimated the traffic that would be generated by the proposed development based on Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE, trip generation data for multi-family housing. And based on that, it showed that there would be an increase of approximately 168 vehicles on a daily basis that would be generated by the site. And that is in vehicle trips. So essentially that's 84 cars coming and going from the site throughout the day. During the morning peak and afternoon peak hours, we would see roughly 17 additional vehicle trips on the study area roadways in the morning and 18 in the afternoon. We distributed these out over our study area intersections based on existing travel patterns in the surrounding area because of the residential nature of the surrounding roadways. And you can see here the rough percentages of how many vehicles coming from each direction. So we anticipate approximately 20% of the vehicle trips out Asbury Street to the west, about 35% on Highland Street to the north, and 45% on Highland Street to the south. Leading beyond our study area, we would see an increase of anywhere between 3 and 8 additional vehicles across an hour during either the weekday AM or PM peak hours. So that equates to approximately 1 additional vehicle every 8 to 20 minutes that may be passing by on any of these roadways. Once we projected the traffic volumes out to the future year condition and added the traffic generated by our project on top of it, we ran a traffic operations analysis to look at the levels of service of the 3 study area intersections, as well as the delay and the queuing. Both the Asbury Street and Site Driveway intersection and the Canterbrook Lane and Asbury Street intersection were both anticipated to operate at level of service B or better, with queues of only 1 vehicle on any of the approaches at any time for all of the study periods that were evaluated. Down at the intersection of Highland Street and Asbury Street, during the weekday morning peak hour, the left turn coming out of Asbury Street onto Highland Street was shown to be at a level of service F, both in the no build and in the build conditions. But we did note that we are only adding an additional 5 vehicles to that approach across that entire hour. And the queues on that approach would only increase by approximately 1 vehicle as a result of the additional traffic. The peer review consultants did review that analysis and agreed that the additional traffic generated by the project should not have a significant impact on the operations to this intersection, although it is at a level of service F under the no build and build condition. They did also note that they did a spot count to verify the traffic counts that we had collected back in January 2020 and adjusted for seasonal variation in COVID conditions. And they found that the traffic volumes were actually significantly lower now than when they were collected then. And delays were also much lower. So as a result, they felt that the project would not have a significant impact on this intersection, and that the delays and levels of service that were shown in the traffic study were probably conservative or a worst case scenario. Once we evaluated the traffic operations of the study area intersections, we also did a safety review to look at collision history, as well as sight lines from each of the site driveways. The section of Asbury Street between the site driveway and down to Highland Street experienced only one collision over the 5-year analysis period that we examined. In addition, the intersection at Canterbrook Lane and Asbury Street also only experienced one crash during that 5-year analysis period. And that crash was a single vehicle collision that where the driver was cited for having a medical illness that resulted in the collision. So no real indication of any safety issues from those collisions. There was an average over the 5-year period of 1.2 crashes per year at the intersection of Asbury Street and Highland Street. And the crash rate there was well below the state and district average for unsignalized crashes. But one thing that we did note at this intersection as a potential safety concern is that there is this small island that is located in the middle of Asbury Street. And if you're coming out of Asbury Street, there is a stop line here. As you can see, it's extremely faded and only comes about halfway across the street. So we did observe that cars were actually coming on the wrong side of the island here, despite the fact that there is a keep right sign. When there's a vehicle stopped here, you don't necessarily see that keep right very well. So one of the things that we had recommended was to remove this island or reconstruct it to provide a little bit more of a 90-degree approach into Highland Street, and at a bare minimum to extend the stop line all the way across the approach so that it's clear that drivers are not supposed to be traveling on the wrong side of the island, and to restripe that so that it is more visible than what it is today. We also did take a look at sight lines coming out of the site driveway, and you can see those in this diagram here. So this one up here represents if you're coming out of the site and you're looking to your right or to the west. And you can see, because of the way the road curves here, you can actually see quite far in this direction, where the sight lines do far exceed AASHTO's recommendations for minimum stopping sight distance and intersection sight distance. This picture here at the bottom represents if you're coming out of the site and looking to the left or to the east. And you can see here, we've kind of stepped out in front of the tree to kind of show you how you can see past it. But this tree right here is blocking the sight lines for a driver that's coming out. So this tree would need to get removed to allow vehicles to see beyond that. But with removal of this one tree here, we would be able to get adequate sight lines to meet AASHTO recommendations for stopping sight distance and intersection sight distance. So based on the findings of our study, we showed that there was not a significant safety issue at any of the study area intersections, other than this one tree that would need to be removed to be able to provide adequate sight lines. And the additional traffic that would be generated by this project would have a very minimal impact on traffic operations at any of the study area intersections. As I mentioned, this traffic study was reviewed by the town's peer review consultant, GM2, who concurred with the study area, the analysis time periods, and the methodologies that we use to project traffic volumes to future year conditions. They also reviewed the crash history and sightline assessment and agreed with the findings of those as well. They did have a couple of minor recommendations, one for providing a stop line coming out of the site as it meets Asbury Street to provide a stop line and stop sign on the driveway approach to Asbury Street, which we are amenable to implementing. The other item was to provide a secondary means of emergency egress access for fire trucks coming into the site, and that is something that we are currently investigating for the best location to be able to provide that. And with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, before that, We have, is it Zates, Mr. Zates? Anything you want to add to that, or? Just, you know, if you want to.
I'll just begin this. My name is Eric Carlson, and I am the chief engineer for GM2's Massachusetts division, and with me is Stefan Zates.
Okay.
Stefan Zates, Stefan worked closely with David Giangrande of our office, who's the senior vice president, and also a PTOE on the review. So we have, you've seen our review. I think in large part we concur with the traffic study as was prepared by GPI. It was prepared in accordance with standard guidelines, in accordance with standard format. And if you'd like, Stefan could walk through our peer review briefly.
Yeah, I think that would, so the public can hear it. And I guess you could think about, I guess, one question is, are there any items that, you know, weren't covered, that haven't been covered to date, that you would add that should be dealt?
Traffic related?
Traffic related, yeah. Right, okay, so, but,
Okay.
If you want to, Mr. Zates?
Thank you. Well, in large part, I think Rebecca covered a majority of our review. As she discussed, the study area we agreed was adequate. We reviewed traffic volumes, and part of that was me going out on site to Highland and Asbury Street to inspect and observe the AM peak hour traffic around 8 o'clock in the morning on a typical weekday. As Rebecca was saying, we saw that traffic volumes were considerably less around that time than what the existing 2022 report was showing. Because of that, we saw that delay was roughly no more than 2 or 3 car lengths, and that because of this, we believe that the traffic volumes show kind of a more conservative approach to what we would see in the build conditions and no build conditions. To comment again, the crash summary, we did review that crash data as well, and we saw that those were all below district averages as well as statewide averages for those crashes of unsignalized intersections. As part of our recommendation, we suggested that we should, a realignment of this intersection would help with driver confusion, safety with crashes, and also provide a possibility to introduce sidewalks into the area that could help reconnect with the rest of the town. Other than that, I believe I've covered everything, and with that, I'm all set. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for either of the presenters from members of the board? We'll start with the board.
Who would be in charge of sidewalks? Put that in.
And relining.
I'm sorry?
And relining the road. And like changing that middle intersection between Asbury and Highland. Is that something Harbor Light?
Will it be DPW?
Right.
I think within reason, you know, that's something that, you know, could also probably be a negotiation between the parties in terms of, you know, funding. So.
Parties of Harbor Light and the town of Hamilton?
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, yeah, I mean, so, I mean, did you have something to say, George?
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chair.
Good evening. Please, if you would go to the.
You probably have experience with this then. We do.
Try to speak when spoken to, as you
Just
know.
identify
Good evening,
yourself for
Mr.
the
Chair. I'm
record.
George Pucci from Town Council's office. I'm representing the board in this 40B matter. Yeah, I just wanted to note, infrastructure that's reasonably related to the project, you can order, so you might want to think about that. I detected from the applicant's report and review that they might be amenable to conditions related to that infrastructure that you're talking about. So what I'd recommend is, further dialogue on that, and in the event of your decision will be down the line. In the event of an approval with conditions, we'd want to include conditions related to those improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One thing I think we should note too is that the Chief of Police and Director of Public Safety had no concerns from a safety point of view. We got an email from him recently on this project.
Yes, I should add, just for the record, we did, the police department has reviewed both reports, both Ms. Brown's report, the applicant's report, and the peer review, and generally agreed with it. I did get an email, which is part of the record. It was not fulsome, but generally agreed with the conclusions of the reports. But yeah, certainly, we'll be getting input on this and other matters from other town departments and boards. And it's been mentioned. I think that the plan is filed as a single entrance and egress. That'll be reviewed by the fire department, public safety, to see if they want to, have a second entrance and egress. So yeah, it's all. But yes, any other questions from members of the board at this point? Is Mr. DeFranza here? Oh, okay. How many, this is just, how many total bedrooms are there in the project?
90.
90 bedrooms, okay. Okay, thanks. And I guess, I think, well, nothing's necessarily obvious. Now, this is more for the traffic folks. Traffic grows arithmetically, not geometrically, right? Or am I right? In other words, if you have twice as many cars, you don't have 4 times as many trips, or, it's 1 to 1. Does anybody, do you understand my question?
Yeah, I think you're asking, based on how many parking spaces you have, is it kind of a 1-to-1 ratio of traffic generation? Is that kind of your question?
It's, it's not rocket science, because I don't do rocket science, but I'm trying to, in my mind, equate it to other substantial projects in town, and what, my just experience is with traffic. So that answers the question to my we can certainly circle back to this with the board. Are there any questions or comments? So start with members of the in-person public. You identify yourself and go to the podium, please.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Dan Hill. I'm an attorney. I represent some of the folks at the Canterbrook development that's next door to this project. I think I spoke to you at the last meeting via Zoom. I'm very happy to be here in person. I did have some questions on traffic, and then I had some comments. So if you could indulge me, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a couple questions on the traffic study. On the question that you just raised, actually, it was my understanding that trip generation was based upon the number of units, not the number of parking spaces. Because if you think about it, a family is going to generate a certain number of trips per day, statistically. It doesn't matter if they have a car or not. So if they don't have a car, they're still going to be traveling. They're going to be traveling by an Uber, maybe a taxi cab in the old days, maybe public transportation. So I think and maybe Rebecca can comment on that, but I don't believe it's a one-to-one ratio based on parking spaces. I think it's actually more of a function of the number of trips a actual unit generates, which includes in those statistics these kind of temporary trips that are provided by services such as Uber.
You are correct. So it is, the trip generation is based on the number of units that are provided.
Okay. And a related question to that is, it was my understanding, so the traffic study used the ITE manual, Institute of Traffic Engineers, Transportation Engineers, which is the appropriate method to determine the trips for any project. Traffic engineers around the state use the ITE manual. So the ITE manual has these different categories of uses, and they chose the multifamily housing mid-rise, which is buildings that are between 3 stories and 10 stories. And this building is a 3-story building. So that's an appropriate category. But I thought that there was, within that category, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that there was a distinction between projects that are close to transit, close to rail, and projects that are not close to rail, and because that would be obviously a big difference. If you could walk to a train station, the number of car trips would be a lot fewer than if you weren't. So I guess that's a question to the engineers. Which am I correct that there's a distinction, number one, and number two, if I am correct, which numbers did you use in the study?
You are correct that there is a distinction between close to rail and not close to rail transit. And we have used the not close to rail transit. So the close to rail is within a half a mile of a rail transit station. So we have used the one that is not close to rail transit.
Okay. And then there's also, ITE publishes a parking generation manual. And I didn't see any discussion actually in the traffic study about parking. I guess maybe there was a reference to there being, what was it, 60 spaces? I think there's 60 spaces for the 45 units. And the bylaw, your bylaw, only requires 1 space per unit, which I'm shocked. I've never seen a town have 1 space per unit. And I'm assuming that's because Hamilton doesn't have multifamily structures, and this hasn't probably ever become an issue because every house has more than 1 parking space. But your bylaw only has 1 space per unit. The ITE parking generation manual has statistics, just like it has statistics for trip generation. And my understanding is that the ITE manual would say that for an apartment building such as this, you'd want to see approximately 1.7 parking spaces per unit. They also have a ratio per bedroom. They have other ratios as well, but the one that I remember is 1.7 spaces per unit. If you applied that ratio to this project, it would be closer to, I think, 75 or 76 spaces. So I'm just wondering, maybe I guess the question is to the developer's engineer, but also to the peer reviewers, was that considered as part of this project? And is there any concern that maybe this project, being frankly quite isolated from mass transit, maybe doesn't have enough parking spaces for the future residents?
So parking was not reviewed as part of the traffic impact and access study for the reason that the parking met zoning. So for that reason, we had not compared it. I don't know the number for this particular use right off the top of my head for multifamily housing. I believe it is a little bit lower than 1.7 though. I'd have to double check on that. But we can check on the ITE numbers to see what would be required. I know one thing that ITE numbers don't take into account is the affordability aspect of the residential units.
So I guess my comment would be that I think the board should be concerned about the level of parking being provided here. And I think there's kind of a give and take. I don't think that my clients would necessarily want to see a larger parking lot, but I think they want to see a better ratio. And so maybe that means fewer units so that we have not a bigger project, a bigger parking lot, but perhaps something that's a little bit more modest in size for the site. with respect to site access, I had some.
Just before you move on
Sure.
that, I'll just, and this is, I'm just based on my many years involved in zoning in Hamilton. I've never seen anybody say, we need a bigger parking lot. I mean,
Right.
you know, so, but I do think, I guess for myself, if it's available, I'd be interested in seeing the socioeconomic data. I mean, because, I mean, we're talking all affordable housing. I assume there's data about everything. It seems likely that given a three-bedroom apartment, if incomes are up here, those folks are gonna probably have more cars than people whose income is down here.
I think that's a great question for the peer reviewers, and I think my experience is that I don't think there's really much difference between someone who's making 50% of median income and 150%. I think if people have to get to work, they have to get to work, and you can't walk.
Okay, well, that's,
You can't walk to the commuter rail station from this location, which is unfortunate, and we, anyway.
Okay, so
So-
next point.
Yeah, and with respect to site distances, I did have a concern about the way this was actually calculated, because we obviously see AASHTO a lot. AASHTO is the acronym, and that's the Green Book, and that's the Bible when it comes to site distances. And so they used, the developers, engineer used the appropriate methodologies, but they actually, in my view, didn't apply the correct standard. So for intersection site distance, which I think is frankly the most critical site distance, because that's the site distance where you're sitting in the driveway of this project, and you have to figure out, do I have enough gap to pull out safely into Asbury Street, take a left turn or a right turn? That's different from stopping site distance when you're already in Asbury Street. So intersection site distance is frankly, to me, the most important for safety. And they applied the 85th percentile speed, which they collected in January of 2022. So that's good. They collected 85th percentile speeds. They applied that for stopping site distance, but for some reason they didn't use that for the calculation of intersection site distance. Instead, they used 35 miles per hour, which is the speed limit, not 43 miles per hour, which is the 85th percentile. So you might be asking yourself, why am I nitpicking about the speed? It's actually material. So if the engineer had used the 43 mile per hour speed limit, if you look at table 4 of the study, that would have resulted in a required minimum sight line of 380 feet, okay? But they only have 340 feet of intersection sight distance at this location looking left. So that's a problem. They don't have adequate intersection sight distance if you use the 85th percentile speed, which is what they're supposed to use, which they're supposed to use under AASHTO. So I don't know why they didn't use it. I assume the reason they didn't use it is because it wasn't helpful to their case. I mean, the 35 mile an hour speed shows intersection sight distance that actually is available. So to me, that's a problem. Now, I know the response will be, well, we have...
Well, let's say, so I guess, we'll assume for the moment that your hypothesis is correct. I think the board's homework assignment is to, you know, what if any design options would alleviate this. So I take your point, but, you know, so that would, I'd be interested in, you know, does Ms. Brown, do you want to comment on this before we move on?
Sure. So the 340 feet that we've shown as being achievable, that is achievable to meet AASHTO's minimum requirements. We can remove more trees to be able to extend that site distance quite a bit further beyond the 340 feet. Obviously, we're trying to minimize tree removal for additional buffering maintain the character of the roadway, but we can remove additional trees if desired. Just to kind of clarify a little bit the difference between stopping sight distance and intersection sight distance. So typically, stopping sight distance is measured based on the 85th percentile speed along the roadway to ensure that regardless of whatever speed someone is going, if they are speeding, they will have enough time to be able to stop if a car were to pull out in front of them without creating a collision. The desirable intersection sight distance that Mr. Hill was describing, that is typically based on the speed limit of the roadway. And the reason for that is it essentially doesn't reward speeders. So if someone is speeding, they will have to slow down significantly, or they could potentially have to slow down significantly for someone coming out of the roadway. But if someone is traveling safely at 35 miles per hour and someone were to pull out of the site driveway, they would not need to slow down excessively for that vehicle. So they wouldn't need to slow down to less than 70% of what they're traveling at. That's how intersection sight distance gets measured. So there's still more than adequate sight line for somebody to be able to stop even at that 35 miles per hour. It's just that they might have to slow down a little bit more to say 60% of their original travel speed if they're traveling faster than 35 miles per hour.
Okay, thank you.
So the problem with that, Mr. Chairman, is that if you're the resident of the project and you're the one pulling out, you don't control how fast the guy in Asbury Street's driving. So I respectfully would disagree that 35 should be the number. Now, Ms. Brown said that they can probably achieve more than 340. We just heard that tonight. I would recommend that the board ask the applicant to provide a diagram. I mean, usually what you see, and you've done zoning enough, so you've seen them, you see these site triangles, and you see the site plan actually showing where these sight lines are on the ground. So I think that would be a reasonable request to ask the applicant to provide the site plan showing where these lines are, how much vegetation needs to be removed, and then you can weigh whether that really is in the best interest of the town.
Okay. Next
We would
point.
be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
And then I wanted to briefly address the waiver request that was submitted last week or 2 weeks ago, and I think I was the one who raised this groundwater protection overlay district issue, and so we're happy to see that that's been raised as a waiver, but the waiver request doesn't actually prove that the project's going to comply with the performance standard. So what the waiver request said was there's a 15%, by right, they call it, and then their project supposedly is 28% impervious surface. And they say, well, that you can trust us, basically, that we're not going to degrade the groundwater. But that's the standard. Under the bylaw, applicants have to prove to the board that they're not going to degrade the groundwater through the recharge systems. Now, you don't typically have a 9,900 gallon septic system come in before you. This is unprecedented. And I mean, just the mug that you have in front of you, Ms. Phillip, is what, half gallon? I mean, picture, 20,000 of those covering an acre of land. This site's like an acre, right? So this is a very, very large volume of water going into the ground on a daily basis, water that's wastewater. Now, it is treated. There is a treatment mechanism in the septic, but it's not perfect, and there's still nitrogen and other pollutants that come out of it. There's a long way of saying, I think what the board needs from the applicant to satisfy itself, if it's going to grant this waiver, is the information that you would be demanding for any other application. You should be getting a groundwater study, a hydrogeological analysis from the applicant, which would include a mounting analysis. This project's going to have to do it anyway because it's over 2,000 gallons. You should ask for a mounting analysis that evaluates the impacts of this recharge system, as well as the stormwater recharge system, cumulative impacts, overlapping impacts, and as well as an analysis on pollutant loading. So that's another typical thing that boards of health ask for and conservation commissions. We know that 9,900 gallons of wastewater is being proposed to be discharged. On top of that, we have a stormwater recharge system on site. They're both within close proximity. Those two systems are going to have pollutants. There's no question. The only question is the degree and whether that's going to degrade the groundwater, which is your job to understand. So I would recommend that the board ask for more information on pollutant loading as well as mounding on these two recharge systems. It's a fairly common thing to ask for. It's what these bylaws are all over the state. Every town that we work in, George can tell you, has these groundwater recharge protection districts. And the language is almost identical in every town. And towns that deal with this have asked for this type of information so it knows, is this going to be a problem? I don't think there's a lot of private wells in the vicinity of the site, but I will say there are obviously it's in a zone 2, so there is a municipal well somewhere nearby, but it's also quite close to the Ipswich River and the entire watershed for that river, which is also a public water supply. So I think there is a significant environmental concern, and I know this is on your agenda for next week, so I'll stop next time and I'll stop talking. But I just want to kind of highlight or preview, this is probably the biggest issue that we're concerned about, is the environmental impacts of these two recharge systems on the environment. And we would suggest between now and the next meeting, perhaps the applicant can provide more information to the board. Thank you.
Any comments from members of the public here with regard to traffic issues? We're discussing traffic today.
Mr. Chair, can we see if Attorney Pucci has any comments based off of what Mr. Hill just said?
I
Not to- okay,
don't know.
great.
It would be, I have no problem with the recommendations he's making to the board. That big topic that he mentioned last time you have scheduled for, your next hearing date, so I really have no comment on it.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I since I can have conversations with the planning director and not violate the open meeting law, I will have conversations with the planning director and about this and other matters, so we know we want to give this whole thing a thorough review. So thank you for your comments, Mr. Hill. Anyone from the Zoomosphere have anything to say? Okay. Any final questions or comments from members of the, okay, please go to the, identify yourself and.
May I ask a question that's not just traffic?
No, well, let's see what this gentleman has to say.
Jack Lawrence, 105 Rock Maple. Yeah, I just want to go on to the collateral. I think is a collateral issue to that. This is a small country road that's suddenly adding over 90 units. And has anybody checked the pipe sizes? Can we supply that kind of water to these projects? There are 4 substantial projects that have been added to the road here in the last 10 years. And if the pipe sizes are not sufficient, who's going to have to redo the water supply?
Okay, thank you. Ma'am, you can ask your question, not, well, we'll see what it is, if we'll answer it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I know all the work that y'all do, and I also really support what Andrew does in general. So,
identify yourself, please.
Sorry, I'm Ellen Rothman, and I'm a resident at Canterbrook, number 6 Canterbrook. And it's related to what I had asked last month, but now that we know that, and I know that they're 2 separate projects, but we have Gordon Conwell and we have this project. And one of those projects could meet the requirement that the town has, so that the character of the town, the size of the building, the problems on Asbury Street don't even have to happen, because we have several phases of the other that would cover what we need to do. So my question is, even though you're looking at them separately, will y'all be looking at what's best for the town on a bigger picture with that?
I guess my answer would be within within limits. I mean, certainly we consider all the circumstances, but, you know, by the law, we have an applicant that's filed filed for a 40B, just like somebody filing anything before the board. We can generally, I mean, we're citizens, consider all circumstances, but, you know, we have to address it, what's been filed with it, within sort of the four corners of it, and within a certain time frame. Now, you know, this is purely speculative. Can we say, you know, could you postpone this? But that would be a matter of, I guess, negotiation with the applicant. I mean, we cannot just say, well, we're not going to deal with this because.
Right, and Safe Harbor can't be, that's closed.
No, that's
closed.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Last call for.
Can I just add one comment, just quickly, I promise?
Regarding traffic.
Yes.
Okay.
I would not go off top. Kathleen Injami, 14 Canterbrook Lane. I just was thinking for a minute, we have Habitat for Humanity, also that project there. And I can't remember if anyone's mentioned some of the traffic, although it won't be a tremendous amount. I just wanted to note that we also have that traffic from that particular development.
Okay.
Not development necessarily, but
Okay,
house.
and Ms. Brown or anyone can address this. The study did,
Yeah,
in addition.
I'm sorry, I couldn't remember.
You know, it had what we have now, and it did have a build factor going out a few years. So
Okay.
presumably that would at least encompass
Okay.
something to do with habitat. So
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone in the Zoomosphere? Okay. I think we need to vote to continue this to our next meeting, which I never have a calendar with me, would be September
6, does that sound right? 7?
first Wednesday.
So then it's probably the 1st.
Okay, to September 7th, at which time we will be discussing water and sewer issues regarding the project. So is there a motion to continue the hearing to September 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m.?
I'll motion, continue.
Okay, moved by Bruce. Is there a second?
Only if it starts at 7.
Second by Member Phillip. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much for your attendance and attention. We'll give a minute for folks that want to clear the room before we move on to the next item. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Attorney Fucci.
Wasn't that a song?
September came rosy.
Thanks, George. Good night. Okay. Moving on, we have the continuation of a public hearing for the property owned by Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, Inc. at 130 Essex Street. Applicant is Harbor Light Community Partners, Inc., seeking a variance from the lot area requirements in zoning bylaw section 4.1 in order to create 3 lots pursuant to zoning bylaw section 5.3.2.1 and findings of fact under zoning bylaw section 5.2 for a change of use from student housing to multifamily dwelling under zoning bylaw section 5.3.1.2 excuse me, in order to construct 3 additions to the existing multifamily dwellings which have historically been used for student housing. So this is a continuation of the hearing from last month, and we'll hear from the applicant or the applicant's representatives and see where we go.
Okay.
Bill, before we start, can you just confirm which 3 members are voting on this?
Yes, although, again, just, we are unlikely to, well, I don't know, may not take a vote tonight, but the members will be myself, Bill Bowler, Bruce Gingrich, and Andy Phillip. Just, you know, I presume, well, one member was, I guess his plane was late, and he may try to catch up through the, you know, watching the tape, but for this purpose, it'll be myself, Bruce, and Andy.
Okay. Did you say Andy missed the first meeting?
They've all been, all of the members have attended, yes, that we're at the first meeting, either in person or on Zoom.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep, okay. Very good.
Okay. My name's Andrew DeFranza. I'm from Harbor Light. I think most people know who we are, but we're an affordable housing nonprofit developer headquartered out of Beverly. We do projects all around the region and North Shore. We're the owners and operators of Firehouse Place, where the Accord Food Pantry is, which some people may know. I was not here at the last meeting. Miranda Samasco, who was with us, was representing us. And so I had a few things I wanted to get feedback on related to the last meeting to clarify some of the points. And then happy to, a little different than a 40B, but happy to take questions or proceed in whatever manner the board sees fit, Mr. Chairman, or however you want to go. So a handful of about 10 quick points here. One is to clarify also for the public at home that Harbor Light does have site control through an option agreement of the 6 residential buildings that exist on the campus. That's A, B, C, D, E, and F, colloquially known as. By way of rumor, although that may be true, I actually lived in D, I believe, or E. I think I lived in E about 25 years ago, though I generally don't admit that in public, but now it's on tape. The plan is for Harbor Light to try to secure essentially approval from this board so that we can convert the existing buildings from one non-conforming use to another. These are buildings that currently have studios, 1-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, and 3-bedroom units. I think occasionally people have been asking me questions since the article in the newspaper about the nature of student housing. So I think it's probably important to note that these are not dormitories. These are not single, multiple young folks in a unit. These are existing family housing units that happen to be students. In my case, I was both a student and a full-time employee in a different community while I was there. There are 210 units in those existing 6 buildings. And Harbor Light is seeking a permit from this board at a minimum of 25% affordability, which would get the town credit on the subsidized housing inventory, which would essentially solve the 40B challenge of Hamilton for a very, very, very long time, as was mentioned by the woman earlier, who I think has left. That would be for the permit as a floor. Our intention within the permit, which is not uncommon for permits that we use, would be to finance these buildings with a federal tax credit, which is something we do often, and finance those 100% of them as affordable with an income cap of 60% of area median income, which for a family of 4 in our region is about $84,000. There would also be a subset within the system at 30% of median income, which would, for a family of 4, is about $42,000. Depending on how the deal got structured financially, there's ratios, but the vast majority of the units would be at 60% of median. And again, to clarify, that is a factor of the financing, not the permitting.
So just to clarify, so all of the units would be physically affordable units, not just countable as affordable units?
You got it.
Okay.
So you would get both the points and the ethics, as it were. So that is true based on intent. There are other people or developers who would where you would get the credit, as you describe it, Mr. Chairman, but not necessarily the actual affordability, also not uncommon.
Yeah, can we get the Zoomers on,
Oh, sorry.
We're still recording, so we could probably keep going, but.
Yeah, it looks like we're back.
And we're back.
We had some kind of bandwidth issue that just dipped out for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're,
Okay. So that was related to the income. We do use a variety of permitting and financing mechanisms to achieve our mission, which is to create affordable housing all around the region. So we use 40B permits, we use change of use permits, we've used reuse of municipal buildings permits, we've rezoned parcels. So we're sort of missional opportunists, as it were. And so we will do whatever, wherever, in order to make sure there's more homes for people that would otherwise be economically vulnerable on the North Shore. Our largest campus, I think there's been some question about that, is 177 units in Beverly. That's Turtle Creek and Turtle Woods. We've had those for a very long time. This plan would likely end up in 2 or 3 financing structures, essentially 210 units. We would not finance at one time, so while we would acquire chunks of buildings, probably 2 at a time, we would then finance them in 2 or 3 sections depending on the availability of public capital at the state. For those of you who know, the buildings A and B and C and D are fairly close together, hence the connectors that we're proposing, and make each of them roughly a 50-unit package. So those would either be a 50-unit transaction and a 50-unit transaction. It's possible we could do them all at once, but that has a lot to do with the current financing climate. And that may vary depending on what happens with ARPA and what kind of capital is available at what timeline and when this might get permitted. However, that's sort of the logic. Gordon Conwell does maintain the right, I think this has been asked, to keep E and F, which are the 2 newer buildings, and roughly 50% of the volume of the whole package. So I mentioned before I lived in, yes, sir?
I'm just stopping you for a second because someone made a concern.
Oh, I'm
losing
sorry.
our connection for some reason on the back end for internet. So, Stephen, did you lose yours also?
Yeah, I don't seem to have any internet.
Yeah, something with our
I think
town hall connection.
it's the volume of data that I'm providing, probably. Killing it up here, and it's a misery.
Clogging the bandwidth here. I don't know how you want to proceed, but if you want to just give it
New
another
Jersey
minute
speed.
well, I don't want, we've already had
We
this
can
problem. but
Still see you on the Zoom. What's the issue there?
I guess the issue is that the Zoom is going in and out. And as you know, in our June meeting, we had the issue and we had to I guess, I would obviously like to continue, but if, how are we buying an open meeting law problem if the Zoom is in and out, I guess is my question.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're having technical difficulties where this was a Zoom and in-person meeting with the Zoom, then, I'd recommend you continue. I guess I was asking because it hasn't gone out on my end, I don't think. I don't know if anyone else on the Zoom.
Let's take a little bit of a break and let our technical folks work their magic, hopefully. So we'll take a 5-minute break and then
It's like trying to sit
Okay,
a
but let's
closing
leave
picture.
the
That's
Zoom
what this is
on,
like. But
so that, if anyone signs in, they see you.
Did they deliver beer?
I would order if they were.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're back.
Are we back?
Second here.
Executive session.
Let me check on the back end.
Yeah.
thought you were going to ask me a question.
No, not yet. You're back on. I think you're good, Mr. Chairman.
Good, okay, we'll give it
We
a,
don't know the reason, so I can't predict, but
okay, we'll give it a couple of minutes, just because people are
Sure.
heading to the restroom and all.
Kim?
It's like 5 degrees hotter in here than in the hallway. Much hotter in here than in the hallway.
Oh, really?
Kind of get a little air here, in this corner at least.
Every time we get a gush, I soak it in.
So is Robin Attorney Pucci's colleague, or who's Robin?
She's also with K&P.
Yeah.
But she got assigned to this. It was whoever, I think she usually does 40B, but when we did the Habitat, she wasn't available, and so George did it. He knows a lot, so I think it's just how they divvied it up.
I got back in.
I think it's something maybe with the Wi-Fi, which
I ran a speed test and I was getting like a quarter of a megabit per second during that down.
But not directly. You have to go through the show, basically.
Controlling it,
Go to,
unfortunately.
Oh, I mean, just like.
Oh, yeah, here, no, but I mean.
Like, she's with us, is my
Slow internet.
She's our, like, explain this.
Right,
Slow internet,
right.
reusing Zoom
I know we got all kinds of
stuff.
I got plenty of notes to bring back and discuss with people that make those decisions.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking too, after there was a time when Patrick was on vacation. I couldn't.
Okay, folks, I think everybody's had a chance to reconnoiter, so we'll be back in session, so.
Would you like me to back
Greg?
up? Or how you feeling about that?
A little bit, but
Okay.
just,
So as what I was mentioning before is this is probably 2 or 3 transactions. We would acquire the buildings at different times sequencing, but we would roll them into specific transactions. So A and B, C and D, and then E and F. But it is possible that A and B and C and D could go together depending on the financial capacity in the public system at the time when the permit would be available to go. So we could describe that in more detail if people like. But that's roughly the logic. The option that we have an agreement on requires deposits along the way, so I have a couple deposits on the table. I do have a deposit now on the table that will be non-refundable as of the end of September, which we would, of course, have something to say about, depending on the timing and the process and the path of the permitting. So that is the case. There are other deposits that we would make to the seminary along the way to maintain site control, which is not uncommon for us. We do that regularly. These buildings would pay taxes where they don't now. That's often a question.
just before you move on.
Yes.
Just because I know this
Please.
is, I want to, obviously, one of the issues is, that's been put forward, it's a little bit beyond, it's not really within your control or this board's control, but
Yes, sir.
obviously what's going to happen to the rest of the parcel. Now, I guess, what do they call them? Reliable sources. I hear that the seminary, I think it's been kind of a moving target as to, is the seminary going, staying, whatnot, that the seminary's plan or goal is to be out of the campus by 2024. Is that your understanding, or do you know?
I am not equipped or involved to speak to that point. So I think that was a key element, is we're not involved with the balance of the campus, timing, planning, strategy, any of that. So
Okay, well,
you'd
I
have to
guess
ask
it's sort of related to that, and I don't want to get too deep
No,
into
please.
the weeds at this point, but if they are going, and say, I could consider 2024 to be short-term.
Yes.
why would they want to retain an option to keep building D and E or E and F or whatever?
They probably wouldn't. If you're asking me to guess, I would say if they are going, probably they don't execute
Okay,
their right,
so
and
that's
we buy it.
been where they were before, but they might not be there anymore.
Correct. I think they were giving themselves room. If you were editorially, I'd say I think they were giving themselves room in the event they needed to house students for some period of time. They could sort of back into it until they were ready.
Okay.
That's my understanding, but I'm not.
Right.
It is a major point. It was going to be my punchline, but it was the major point is
Sorry
that
to steal your thunder.
you know, we're not involved in the balance of the campus, so we're specifically interested in the 6 buildings.
Right.
A couple other things I was mentioning, we do pay taxes. We report on that if people wanted to check that on our website on all of our buildings. That is at the valuation of the affordable housing, which is usually a calculation based on NOI and cap rates, as most of the assessors will do. But it would pay taxes where it doesn't now. A couple more points just briefly. One is we were asked and are willing to keep pace with deposits with the seminary and with the ZBA peer review process, should that be your wish, as it's consistent with how the permitting path is going forward. We are cognizant and a little concerned about wanting to get too far over our skis and have spent a lot of money or put a lot of money at risk for a permitting path that is or is not viable. So that's part of what we would like to know, is does the path seem viable? I think other people were asking about our pipeline. Some questions were involved in about 6 or 7 projects at the moment. We just finished one last week that's being occupied now in Beverly. We're building another one in Rockport. We have a bunch sort of all over the community for families, for adults with developmental disabilities, for seniors, et cetera. We'll actually start the project in Wenham later this year, hopefully, if all goes well. And as I mentioned, the balance of the parcel is not something we're involved with, though I know that's a very significant concern in the community. We're sort of concerned to know how the permitting is gonna go from here and the sequencing of that, and happy to talk about that or answer questions as the board may see fit. So that's my quick summary. I did not break the internet again yet, but happy to take other questions or sit as you wish.
Any questions at this point from my colleagues? Questions, comments? Okay, we did have we had a presentation on the outline of the plan last time.
Yep.
Have there been any changes to the plan since then?
No.
Okay.
Bill, I have one question, or
Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
go
I have
ahead.
one question. I understand this is not a 40B project, but what kind of timeline do we have to commit to for an answer for this, knowing that the applicant wants something next meeting, but if we're not ready for that, can you walk me through what that looks like?
We have time. I'm kind of going from memory here. I think we have like, perhaps Robin Stein will get me off the hook here.
No,
with the details.
sure, I would be happy to. So there's 2 different forms of relief have been sought here, finding in a variance. The timeline on the finding, isn't specific, but on the variance, you have 100 days to make your decision, to vote your decision, and then 14 days to get it filed. And it's my understanding this application was filed in early June. I'm sure you have it in front of you. Can confirm the application date, maybe June 6th that was filed, I believe.
Does anybody have their copy?
June 6th or June 9th it was filed.
June 6th would have been the meeting, last meeting.
No, you met in July.
Okay. So it'd be 100 days from the date of filing.
So you're bumping up right close to your next meeting for taking action on the variance. So in either way, just because things can happen, my recommendation would be that you have a discussion with the applicant tonight about extending the time for the board to act on this. just to be careful. And that's something I had raised to Harbor Light's attorney earlier in the week as well. I don't know if Miranda's there, but that's something I mentioned to her as well.
She's coming up.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chair, Miranda Simasco. Yes, I think Robin and I did discuss the applicant's willingness to extend deadlines, and I think the answer to that is as long as we feel like we're making progress and there's still a permitting path that is viable, then that's certainly something that we are willing to work with the town on. And as Andrew said, we understand that while this application is pending, the town has put forth some reasonable requests for some peer review. Obviously, that takes time. I think the real issue is whether we can get comfortable that there's going to be action within that time.
Got it. Okay.
And I don't know, I would note that representatives from the seminary are actually on Zoom this evening and may want to comment.
Okay. Okay, so how shall we proceed? I mean, there's a lot of there's a I mean, from what's before this board is relatively simple, or more simple, but then there's a bigger picture. So I think maybe I know people have a lot of questions and comments. I'd entertain some brief questions and comments, starting with members of the in-person public, to ask questions, get some sense of what's going on.
Rick Mitchell, 36 Rock Maple Ave. A number of comments. One is last time before the board, the Harbor Light representatives indicated this was going to be a market rate development, 25% affordable, then all 210 units would count. Now I understand it's really going to be all affordable housing. So that seems to be a pretty dramatic change, and the impacts will be significant in terms of the population that will be in the town. But I'd like to update you on what's occurred since the last time I was before you, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
Just remember the words of the immortal bard.
Keep it brief.
Brevity is the soul of wit.
Okay. Well, based on my last comments, I got a call from Scott Sundquist, the president of the seminary, and I got an email from Andrew, both of them requesting a meeting with me based on the comments that I made. I'll try and summarize those. I met over breakfast with Scott, and we had a very good conversation, very frank conversation, where I expressed my concerns about the lack of clarity of where the seminary was going. In terms of this project specifically, we don't know whether they're going to get building E and F or not. They don't know whether they're going to keep the mansion or not. They don't know if they're going to keep various pieces. And they really don't. They're still in the process of trying to figure out how they can exit that property into another property. I think it's going to be in downtown Boston. So that piece is in play. Scott heard my comments, and he said, I'm going to put together a committee to meet with the town to discuss this, and that includes their vice president of strategic planning, their CFO, Scott, and Ken Barnes, the project manager that's going to try and help them move. So that's all good. And in addition, I said to both Scott, and I've said that to Andrew, and I've said it here before the Zoning Board of Appeals, is we need a plan. You can't just make this decision in isolation. 210 units is a massive project. 210 units in Hamilton. It sounds like this would be the largest project that Harbor Lights has done ever. And the lack of clarity in the presentation tonight, to me, is shocking. It's a very generalization. If and when we get financing, whatever that financing will be, will determine the makeup of the project. And it could be coming anywhere from, and I don't know. I have no idea what the timing is, how many years this will take. It's going to be in multiple phases. We have no discussion of the implications on the infrastructure of the existing campus. We have no indication of how, if the campus is sold, how that's going to impact the traffic. We've heard traffic from this project, but not the overall project. I made those comments to a number of people. Scott thought they were worthy of further thought and further discussion, and I've set up a meeting with Ken Barnes, their project manager. And just so you know, I'm not off the field on my own. I have talked to the chair of the planning of the board, select board, Sean Farrell, and Sean Farrell is on board with this. And in fact, we have started to meet potential consultants to do a strategic plan for the entire campus. Sean was at that meeting along with Emil Dahlquist, also of the planning board. We're going to meet with another consultant not this week, but the following week, to determine if we can do a strategic plan, 4 to 6 months, look at the entire campus. What are the potential for development there? It could be any one of these things. It could include affordable housing. It could be commercial. It could be some mixed use. It might be, we are now considering, when we go to town meeting, almost $1 million bond issue for a feasibility study of what we do with the 3 elementary schools. And that potentially could go there too. We don't know, and that's the problem. So I just find it, I would beseech you as the ZBA to think about this, that we're trying to put together a thoughtful process to look at where that property should go, and involve the seminary in the process as well, and hopefully they will pay 50% of the cost for consulting. We haven't talked about that, but I think that would be fair, so that it's a joint discussion of the highest and best uses of that piece of property to the benefit of the seminary and to the town of Hamilton. So I don't think you can make a decision on this application of change of use right now, because you know nothing. You really know nothing about this project. They've told you what it might look like and how it might be financed and what buildings it might include, but there's no specificity. I serve on the planning board. If an applicant came before us, we would be asking very specific questions about timing, financing, infrastructure, water, sewer. And there's none of that. It just doesn't exist. So just trust that it'll be done right some point at the future. I don't think that's good planning, and that's certainly not fair to the citizens of Hamilton to just walk off and say, well, sure, go ahead, get a change of use, and hope for the best. So thank you.
Okay.
My name is John Despic. I live at 195 Woodbury Street. I think you should know that a number of neighbors in the vicinity are angry because of the total lack of clarity and lack of sincerity as well that seems to be apparent and abounding here. And the one thing I'd like to add from a personal point of view, which I've never heard anyone mention, certainly not Scott Sundquist, is when, and finally things will sell, when the properties sell, is there any thought whatsoever to paying back the massive amounts that were promised to the town of Hamilton over several years? We're talking apparently tens of millions of dollars, many of them. I am not exactly happy, and a bunch of us are getting together soon, and we will be acting.
Anyone else have questions, brief questions, comments? And non-repetitive, please, ma'am, you can.
Good evening. My name is Valerie Peck, and I'm the owner of 37 Miles River Road. I am a direct abutter, and I guess, and not very familiar with the overall zoning process. One thing I do know is that what I'm learning tonight is I have less than 30 days to all of a sudden have a major impact potentially occurring on the property right next to me. I literally abut probably 600 feet right adjacent alongside the seminary. And I did speak with Scott. I've met with Scott. And I think I'm still in shock just at the rapidity with which this process is happening. And we're already talking about ZBA deposits and a lot of other items that seem to indicate that it's already a done deal without even an abutter being notified. So I won't belabor that anymore, but I am going to delve in deeply to what's transpiring. And I, too, am not adverse to something happening, but I think it needs to be in a really logical, thoughtful, because we have to live with this for a long time. So thank you.
I just said, you know, the applicant has complied with the law, and so that's.
Bill, can I ask Robin a question?
I'm sorry?
Can I ask Robin a question?
Oh, absolutely.
Robin, I have a question for you. I'm wondering if you could give us some clarity around looking at this application compared to looking at the bigger picture. Specifically knowing that the Zoning Board of Appeals has a lot of black and white. It's easy, should be relatively easy for us to to talk about this. But when you start bringing in the noise of, let's talk strategic plan, let's talk about how the overall development should be, is that within our purview? Because that doesn't, is that within our purview and being respectful to the applicant in a timely manner?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenging question. And hearing the feedback tonight is definitely going to give me some things to think about, and maybe come back and talk more about it at your next meeting. But I mean, ultimately, you have to apply the finding standard and the variance standards to these applications. And, you know, whether or not you have sufficient information to be able to do that, that's another question. But, you know, that's certainly an issue, kind of how far the scope of that review goes. I'm happy to kind of try to pull some cases and get some more specific guidance for you on during the next meeting.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Happy to do it.
Hi, Jake Fumara, 139 Essex Street. My question is, there's a lot of attorneys in the room, is more just about, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit Rudy Pisano's letter, but this is something that was formed under a variance and a special permit. You're now being asked to carve off a piece of it and put another variance on top of that. It would seem like, I think what you were sort of alluding to, at least I was sitting here listening to the Lake Ave, like, it's not a hardship. This is not a financial hardship for Dr. Sundquist and the school. So it would seem like there are parts of this that are pretty easy to come to a conclusion on, rather than, you know, and I think Andrew would probably welcome some sort of direction as well. So it's just really a question about a variance in general, because it seems like there's different standards.
Well, I'll take a stab at. I'm aware of Mr. Thompson's letter, and I have a copy of it, but I haven't had a chance to read it. But off the top of my head, I'm not certain that he correctly interprets the law that applied here in 1975, which I was not here, but I've certainly had dealings with the seminary over the years as a selectman and whatnot. The decision refers to a variance, but there was site plan review by the zoning board then that granted it. And yes, the seminary promised to make payments, which they certainly have not made them to the extent that that the promise was made. I have a question, and certainly we'll get input from town council on this, but because of the Dover Amendment, the seminary may have made an ill-advised statement, but it was not made a condition of the decision. So it's certainly understandable to that over the years citizens have been aggravated that the seminary, in their view, may not have lived up to what they said they were going to do. But in a legal standpoint, it's questionable whether they ever had to agree to it at all. So it is not an enforceable condition. And as under the Dover Amendment, they had the right to, they're exempt from many forms of zoning. So not certain that the term variance applies. So.
No, I agree with you that the term variance might not apply to the school, but it does apply to Andrew, right? To get a variance on a smaller parcel. And further to that, I would say, I agree the language on the payments is gray at best, but I'm not even going there. I'm talking more about the fact that, like, now the school got there under the Dover Amendment. Granted, they still had to follow certain things, even with the Dover Amendment. And now that they're carving off pieces, are they now in violation of the permit that they were granted back in 1975? Or can they just whittle it down until there's essentially nothing left? And it feels like we're chasing our tail a little bit here, and there's a lot of people, and Andrew's spending money, and you guys are spending time, but it just feels like the school needs to do a lot more work, and we're just not there yet. So that's all I wanted to sort of point out.
Okay, something new, Mr.
Yeah,
Mitchell?
me again. Actually, I think this is actually pretty simple. And I talked to Andrew about this, and he said, I really feel like I'm caught between a rock and a hard place because I just want to do affordable housing, which is great and very supportive of that. But the college and Andrew could actually extend the time frame by mutually agreeing that there needs to be more discussion with the Zoning Board of Appeals, with the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, God knows who else in town, so that we actually are making intelligent decisions. You are not driven by having to make a decision. Yes, you could make a decision. You are driven by that 100-day, but you don't have enough information to make a decision. I mean, it's simply, all you have to do is say, we can't make a decision yet. We need more time. We want input from various parties, and figure out a logical path forward to the benefit of everybody that could include affordable housing, maybe not 210 units, because I think that's building a small city in a very rural place. I think there's plenty of room here if all the parties agree that we should be doing something logical, intelligent, and benefits all the parties that are part of this discussion. So it just requires the seminary to extend the deadline for putting down what I understand is a $100,000 deposit to continue the option. And it requires Andrew to be flexible and saying, okay, I'm willing to do that while we figure out what the best path forward is. Thank you.
All right, John Shuck, I live at 175 Woodbury. The thing that bothers me a little bit is I keep hearing two parties, the town and Andrew and the seminary. Now, there are three parties. There's the abutters, right? We have to live with this for the next God knows how many years of whatever decision's made. And so whatever is done there, which right now sounds piecemeal at best and less than planned, we have to live with this. So there really are three parties, and I really surface that a little bit because I keep hearing two. We're hardly involved in this process as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Andrew, you had something you wanted to?
I just wanted to make sure you didn't have any other public questions before I responded.
Are there any other questions or comments in the Zoomosphere?
Mr. Chair, Myron Walters, I'm an attorney for the seminary. I also am a Hamilton resident down at Veranda Circle. Really just here to say that we are here. Ken Barnes is also on Zoom with us, and as you've heard, he's the project manager. But maybe I can address a couple of things that were raised. You know, first off, the buildings exist, and they've existed, some of them, for over 40 years. So this idea that we're looking to build something new is just not accurate. It's been there. They've been heavily used. We've had seminary students living there now for many, many years. So the impact on the town is different from a project that looks to build entirely new buildings and a new location. This is just a change from student use to the uses that Andrew wants to put it to. So that'd be the first thing. The second, it was the town that came to the seminary back in February, and folks in town, including the strategic planning team, came to us, and they are the ones that raised with us the question of whether or not the seminary would be open to rezoning the seminary campus. And this was before there was any talk of selling part of it, et cetera, other than we've been in communication with Andrew for quite a while. And so we talked about it as a board, and the board agreed that this would be a good thing to work with the town, whatever the future held for the seminary at the property, to work with the town. There's a real mutual benefit here, obviously. It's to the seminary's advantage to have more uses here of a commercial nature, but also it's clearly to the town's benefit. It's one of the few parcels that the town has identified as being really compatible with some kind of an expanded use, not just single-family residences. In fact, we've heard from a number of people that selling to a developer, and we've been approached by many people, including some of the largest developers in the country, seeking to put in rather large homes and just dot the whole hillside with them. And we've heard from a lot of people that that's not something that the town wants, and it would be missed opportunity for the town if the seminary were to sell to that kind of a developer. But we're looking to do this, really, they're two separate things, and linking them is really not to anyone's advantage, for the simple reason that the seminary's purpose in doing this is, of course, motivated in good part by finances. And so the sale to Harbor Light is one of the ways that we are going to be able to essentially buy the kind of time to work with the town on the remainder of the parcel. So linking them together is just not going to work. We just won't have the financial bandwidth and ability to engage in the kind of process to do it right, based even just on the things we've heard tonight, but certainly the things we've heard in other meetings and from people, especially the abutters, but other people throughout town. To do this right is going to take time, and moving forward with the sale of the apartments to Andrew is what is going to give the seminary the kind of time to do it. So I would encourage the board to stay within its correct and rightful parameters. The questions have been rightly asked, and town council, I think, will be able to provide more information, but I think she'll probably come and agree that the zoning board's purview is not to be involved in master planning and in that process, nor should those come into the equation on this transaction. And so I'd encourage the zoning board to stay within that. And that's, I'm happy to answer other questions, but I wanted to make those points. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence.
Chairman, unfortunately, the town is engaged in master planning, and we've had so little information on what's going on. We do know, I believe, that the seminary has 2 loans that were coming up due this summer, both with large balloon payments, clearly to the extent that they are not able to pay those off. They're going to come back at a much higher interest rate, clearly, than pertained heretofore. And we have no idea what the real financial situation of the seminary is. All of these, where we don't have information, the nameless fears take over, as you well know. And so we have to consider all these contingencies. I'm delighted to hear that Mr. Mitchell is digging into this thing and digging in tight. But all of these uncertainties are leaving us with no way to kind of look at how the town is going to go forward. And quite frankly, those cash flows that we are looking at from the seminary, ultimately down the road, the potentials and so forth, are critical to this town and its financial condition and its stability going forward. So these are all things that are extremely important. And I'm hoping that things can really get down to brass tacks here, and that out of this, in the very near future, is going to come some kind of a business plan that's going to model out the kind of rental incomes that are going to be realized should different scenarios pertain. We really need some data, and we're not getting it right now. So good luck, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, last speaker.
Clark Sandler, 137 Essex Street, right across the road from the main entrance, in and out. There's a few issues I have. One is on this 210 units. I'd like to know how many bedrooms are in there. And that is a broader question. It's a question with broader impact on many smaller, detailed things. Another thing I would like to have an analysis, and usually the town does this when they talk about developing a property with 2 or 3, 4 houses, not with 210 units. So now it's 100% low income. Last meeting we had a few weeks ago was 25%. I would like the town or somebody to do an analysis of the tax revenue that the town is going to get from 100% affordable housing, as opposed to housing that's percentage is affordable. So it's going to be a significant difference between that and putting in another type of development in there for the benefit of the town. The last thing there's also a mention in the minutes. I read David Thompson's letter. He talks about the millions that's owed, and you made a statement which I agree with you to some extent. It was not a condition that was placed in there that this money was going to be given back to the town, but it was used as a persuasion. So that's a difference of words, but it has a big difference in meaning. So it was a persuasion of the rezoning back in 1977. And the last thing is, I'd like to say that I do not want the board to feel pressured because you have a time element, and if there's an extension, I'm not sure if that extension starts from day one again. I'd like to see an extension on this. There's too many unanswered questions. Andrew can help with some of these, but I don't want the board to feel pressured that you have to meet this deadline and make a decision that you can't go back on. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. I said he was the last speaker.
Well, he wasn't, because I
He is. I mean,
Dave Dashkin, 215 Woodbury Street. I am in a butter. I'm a butter of the so-called septic system. And that is the major issue of that whole, any development on that property, the entire property, let alone this nice carve out where they just say it's just a change of use. And they're gonna carve out who's gonna run and operate that septic system. The septic system now is not up to code. So until that is fully analyzed and how they're gonna provide septic system capable on that property, none of this is viable.
Okay, thanks. Okay, here's how I propose that we move forward. First of all, if my colleagues have any issues that they can think of right now that they want additional information on, let's let the applicant know. Okay. And second, so we'll meet next month, and I think we'll have homework to do. There's a lot of material that's been submitted that we should review so that we really get up to speed on what's there. And then I think it's, we can, at that point, I think we can obviously discuss. I think it's fair to the applicant to, if, take a straw vote to give some indication of, based on what we have, we're leaning yes, leaning no, not committing to anything, but I think that's reasonable. And, what additional information we want to, we think we need to go forward. I think that's reasonable, and then we can discuss, if it seems appropriate, extending the time. So that's what I would propose. So you'll all be getting packets to review when you're at the beach. So I think we need to continue this hearing, vote to continue to September 7th. Is there a motion to continue the hearing to September 7th, 2022?
I set the motion.
Bill, before you do that, did you want to talk about any continuance this evening, because that date is getting close to the 100 days, or you wanted to do that at your next meeting?
I think, I guess I'd say we're likely to seek an extension, but, I'm sure between now and then there'll be discussions around this, and I guess I would prefer to do it at the September meeting when we've presumably given the applicant, some sense of whether we're likely to go forward or approve it or not. So.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay? Okay, so you made the motion?
I did.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Sorry,
all
can I
those-
just confirm the motions to continue to September 7th
September 7th
at 7 p.m.?
7 p.m. after
In
the
the
40
In the
days.
same format, it'll be live and potentially hybrid as well?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
okay. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, thank you. We do have some minutes to approve, if people are ready to approve them. So we have the June minutes and the July minutes. Oh, geez, this is the most exciting part of the meeting. Is there a motion to approve the June and July minutes? And I guess I'm going to suggest that you didn't you were on the Zoom, but you can make the motion
Okay.
and second it, but abstain from approving the minutes. So, is there a motion to approve the June and July minutes?
I set the motion to approve the
Okay.
June and July minutes.
Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Not voting, abstaining is Andy Phillip. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I set the motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Thank you all for coming and your attendance.
Already out of here.